then maybe... How about that? Do I do the mic in the shot? Like a streamer or something?
He says as my mic is in shot.
Like a streamer or something?
Yeah.
You got 2 microphones in shot because of your headset.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's close enough. Okay, so when I switch back to this screen, that should, yeah, that's great. 10 out of 10.
Love that. Okay, so I'm gonna put this over here like so. And then I'm gonna do this and pull up your outline. And then I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so that I can actually fucking read it. There we go. Okay. So, how we doing?
Alrighty. Let me add. Actually, first of all, I need to turn that down. That should be good.
Do you want me to absolutely fucking raw dog an intro?
Hello once again, Ollie.
Yeah, for real.
No, hey guys. It's been 3 years.
It really has. Oh my god.
Sorry
I
we
can't believe
didn't
that.
write.
Mm-hmm.
So collab cam is a thing now, so that makes that hell of a lot easier.
Yes.
And even though we are called the early morning sad hour, it is currently 6:30 p.m.
It's morning for someone.
Yes, it's morning out there somewhere.
I'm always morning, dude. I'm still alive.
But shoot, I don't even remember what our old format was. But the current format, as it stands, we will go back and forth picking a subject that interests us, and we'll kind of share it, more or less.
Yeah. At the risk of being 2 late 20s white dudes with scraggly beards doing their own research on the internet, we're going to be 2 white dudes in their late 20s with scraggly beards doing their own research on the internet.
I forgot the disclaimer that we are in no way
we are not experts. No, the whole point of this is that we like to talk about things like this just in our downtime. We like to kind of take deep dives on subjects of interest, and we want to share what we find on things that we're interested in, and also kind of maybe, push everybody else to do the same kind of thing, to actually take the time and research. I mean, the amount of research that Mike has done on the topic that we're going to talk about today is, as far as he's told me, quite a lot. The whole point is that we haven't talked about it like at all, so that this is going to be like an interview where he's like teaching me kind of. But
more or less, yeah.
He's done his due diligence, and we think that that's cool, and we think more people should do that. So this is kind of an experiment in that direction.
The only way I was ready today was the fact that it was kind of slow at work, and I was like taking the back of tickets and like, okay, can I write down from memory all the different without spoiling the topic yet? Like, I was just trying to make sure I can actually properly recall the information I'm trying to share.
Yeah.
But this episode, it may be 2, maybe 3. Honestly, the deeper I go into this rabbit hole, the more chaotic my notes have gotten. But today we are going to be talking about the Sea Peoples.
And so I guess the first question, Mike, is what the fuck are the Sea Peoples?
So,
Like, what are we even talking about here?
if I learned anything from, the History Channel at like 4 p.m., aliens. No, the Sea Peoples.
I'm not gonna lie. When you sent me this and you only sent the name of the document, I thought it was about mermaids. I did. No cap. I thought it was about mermaids in Atlantis. So, actually, go ahead.
So the Sea Peoples are an enigma. They are to us mysterious. We have absolutely like no concrete explanation of who they are, or even where they came from.
Apart from the sea.
Yeah, so actually a lot of the perspective we do have on the Sea People, it's kind of refreshing, because a lot of Bronze Age, it's a lot of very easy to kind of have this Mycenaean centric point of view, like Homer and all that. The majority of the context we have for the Sea People is actually from Egyptian sources. Big point of reference is Ramses III, who really liked to catalog his military exploits through architecture and their hieroglyphics and stuff like that. But to really kind of get context on the Sea Peoples, there is kind of this point in the Bronze Age. It's called the Late Bronze Age Collapse, and the Sea People often get a very bad rap, I guess, being kind of tied up as one of the causes for the collapse, whereas the more I've researched, it kind of comes down to they were just as much a victim as anyone else. So their relevance in the actual collapse is more of a symptom rather than one of the direct causes. The collapse itself, it's another one of those things where it's argued whether or not it was earthquakes, famine, drought, plague, foreign invasion, and all that. And honestly, it's more of a snowball effect of one place has a drought. So yeah, let's say Mycenaean Greece has some really bad years in a row of drought and whatnot. That can lead to them requiring food from outside sources like Egypt, because the major powers at the time of the collapse were kind of, for reference, was the Hittite Empire. So we're talking years and years before even Rome was founded. We're talking.
This is like pre-Roman Republic and early Roman Republic times, like Roman Kingdom times.
Yeah, the Bronze Age itself was kind of 3300 BC to 1200 BC. And for reference, the founding of Rome is roughly 753 BC. So we got a couple thousand years of history here before that.
Yeah.
The collapse itself, like I said, was a series of catastrophic events that ultimately snowballed into this widespread societal collapse that affected a large portion of the Eastern Mediterranean. North Africa, Southeast Europe, the Near East, like the Levant and the Balkans, the Aegean, Anatolia, all affected by these
Like
chain of
South Central and
events.
Eastern Europe, and the Middle East and North Africa, the Mediterranean greater sphere of influence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can. What caused all of that is a completely different topic. But that just kind of gives context to what the discussion about the Sea Peoples is about.
Mhm.
The Sea Peoples themselves, from a lot of the names, the individual peoples, because it was a loose confederation of many different people. A lot of people are more assuming that each of the named peoples are of different ethnicities,
Mhm.
and that uh, so it's a collection of people from all over the Mediterranean, essentially trying to escape the collapse of the Bronze Age. You know, you don't have food, harvests, and stuff like that. Sea lanes collapse. You don't have access to the tin from
The
ancient
far reaches of
Afghanistan,
Tinland. Yeah.
uh, and places where the bronze did come from, like Crete and stuff like that.
Mhm.
They don't have access to the tin. They can't make bronze, so tools can't get made and stuff like that. The things you need to survive, you can't get to. So what do you do in those times? A lot of them went to raiding the routes that they once traded on.
Mhm.
And from the Egyptian sources, a lot of these names they have translates roughly to of the seas.
Mhm.
So a lot of it was sea, but they also had land based elements. If I can pull up.
So while you do that, let me just kind of wrap my head around this real quick. So we're talking about a Bronze Age collapse era, very early version, like Mediterranean version of Vikings. Like people didn't even know where they were from. They're just like, I don't know. They're from the sea and they come and they take our shit.
Yeah, from our perspective.
From
From
the Egyptian historical perspective.
yeah,
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
from the perspective of the people at the time, these
Mhm.
were all people they already knew of.
Okay.
There is actually, I believe it was Ramses the Second at the
Mhm.
Battle of Kadesh between the Hittite Empire and the ancient Egyptian Empire. One, one of the Sea Peoples was actually, if I'm understanding correctly, more or less they were fighting on the same side as the Hittite Empire as mercenaries. Uh, and there was another incident where I think they were fighting alongside the Libyans.
Mhm.
So, from our perspective, yes, they're kind of these mysterious peoples because really the only real references we have to them at this point come from Egyptian sources because Mycenaeans at this point basically drop off the grid completely. During the collapse, they went into a dark age, basically. There is no writing or anything from this point of history between the collapse and the Iron Age.
So
Another. Go ahead.
this is like pre-Phoenicians as well, right? Because the Phoenicians didn't show up until around the time that Rome did. Am I correct? Or just a little before Rome?
I believe you are correct. So we are thinking like Old Testament biblical times, kind of.
Right.
This is
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when
This is like hundreds of years before Rome and Phoenicia and everybody. This is like even before the collapse started. They were there during the height of the Bronze Age as well.
yes, yes.
Okay.
And we can kind of touch on like the different theories of which each group that the Egyptians named came from. The
Hmm.
other major source that we have is a lot more vague. They were found in 1928 in what was the just rediscovered city of Ugarit, which was
Okay.
a city state. We're talking like Babylon was a thing at this point.
Mhm.
City of Tyre was already founded. Memphis, Troy would it have existed around this time. Mycenae, Knossos, Crete was Aliwaha or something at this point. I would have to check my notes. The Assyrian Empire was a thing, but
Oh yeah.
that's kind of where it's at as far
Okay.
as time periods. The source of Ugarits kind of comes from clay tablets, and this is
Hmm.
actually the earliest known alphabetic language, written language. It was cuneiform, so it was taken from reeds, pointed ends of reeds, and they would kind of make different symbols into the tablets. And it was very basic, but it was small enough where it has like 30, 40 letters, so it's based on uh, consonants and vowels and whatnot versus like a syllable
So this is like a
alphabetic.
very early like printing press version of writing rather than freehand.
More, it would be freehand, but they would use reeds and clay tablets and then fire those. Those would be like their letters and stuff like that, and they found
Okay.
dozens of these clay tablets. Some of them were even like prepared to be being prepared to be fired, and there's actually clay tablets that were exchanged between Ugarit and the island of Crete, where basically, let me if I can pull up an exact. I couldn't really go into all of them without spending all day on this, but
I'm sure you could spend a lot more than a day on it if you really
oh yeah. Okay, so
wanted to.
I
So
forgot his name.
the main sources are Egypt and the Ugarit tablets that they found. And are there any other major sources that tell us about the
Uh,
Sea Peoples?
if there are, they haven't really been discussed.
Okay.
At least not in the context as being referred to as the Sea Peoples.
Okay.
This map right here, though, kind of highlights the extent of the different empires
Hmm.
at the time. Alicia, yeah, that Alicia was the name of Crete at the time. But what did I write here? Yeah, yeah, we already covered that. This is kind of an overview map of kind of this different routes that the Sea Peoples probably took while on their skirmishes and invasions. I'm really trying to find that letter. But it's basically a letter between two kings, and the dude is saying, "Yo, I see these ships.
Okay.
Send help." And the
Right.
king of Ugarit, I believe, sent a reply saying, "Make yourself strong. Prepare your
Mhm.
people. Keep an eye on the ships. Build your walls, and make yourself very, very strong." And the reply that they got back was essentially, they're already here, and they've burned my cities and done great harm to my land. Doesn't my father know that my men are, I think they said, my men are away and my ships are at Luca?
Mhm.
And more
Where's
or
that?
less, Luca is southwest Anatolia. So
Okay.
it would be kind of this little area here is the basically the biggest following and where people think Luca might have been. That would have been like the Lyrians and stuff like
So
that.
so basically the Cretes had sent all their shit away, and then the sea people showed up when all the ships were gone and they were vulnerable, and they showed up and raided the island.
Yep. And then actually moved on to Ugarit thereafter and destroyed Ugarit, and they spent a lot of time trying to figure out what exactly caused Ugarit to fall. And all the evidence pointed it to being very, very sudden, because you had these balls of clay that still needed to be mashed, they had tablets that still needed to be fired, valuables and stuff that you would normally, like, okay, so yeah, drought, famine, well, let's pack up our stuff and leave. This was, I'm getting the fuck out of here right now.
It's like Pompeii or Chernobyl or something where you can just see people's lives were like stopped. It's like a picture of what their lives looked like all these thousands of years later.
Yeah. Another big thing that points that to that is all the frickin' arrows they found all over in the city.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
kind of indicative
digress.
of not dying of famine.
But that's they did play in kind of like a collapse type. They played into the collapse for other people ish. You
Mhm.
know, it was basically giant waves of migration, not like these organized armies. They had women, children, goods, and all that with them as they were doing this. Uh, but when you get into the Egyptian citations that we have, uh, as you can see here, they have like the Denyen were mentioned, and their connection to the sea is, I guess, the translation to that is in their isles. The
Mhm.
Denyen, more or less, are expected to be the Archean or some of the Greeks. There is also the theory that they could have been one of the 12 tribes of Israel when they joined up with the Hebrews,
Okay.
uh, or even from the land of Danuna near Ugarit. There's a few debated locations, but the most widely accepted theory is that they were the Danons from Greece. So they were one of the Mycenaean cultures. Eqesh was another one of the more the Achaean Greeks. So like Mycenaean, they had that palace structure, like a palace centric structure, if I remember correctly.
What does that mean?
So you have your central authority, and you have these people, farmers. One of the offsets for like drought and famine and stuff is when you're a farmer, you sometimes have surplus. You can sell some off and stuff like that, but you don't really have any place yourself to store it. So you would send it to a palace or a gathering point set up by your central authority to take the excess, store it, and then release it when there are times of drought and famine. The problem with a system like that is if you have repeatedly bad harvests and stuff like that, eventually you're going to have a deficit in your stores. So that
As we
kind of,
know from a stronghold,
yeah,
the granary is empty, sire.
which leads to
Not good news.
revolts. And like, you know, it's hard to like, oh, you failed to feed us, you're kind of a bad king. Like that, yeah, that's an argument, not necessarily wrong. So like, some of these people were identified as the Denian from the Egyptian sources. Eqesh was another more of a Greek group of peoples, but there is kind of a some sort of difference between the Eqesh and the Denian. I think it comes down to regional location, and we already kind of touched on Luca, which was that Western Anatolia area.
Yep.
A fun one. This is really the only one where people are like, yeah, we think we kind of have this figured out. And a big part of this is from recent DNA testing.
Well, that's cool.
The Peliset was another one of the tribes, kind of, or peoples mentioned by the Egyptians. The Peliset is widely to be the Philistines from the Bible.
Okay.
So with like Goliath being their champion and all that.
Yeah. They were big players for a lot of the Old Testament stories, so that tracks with them being involved all across the Bronze Age.
Right, and they would have been in that Levant area already. Kind of a warrior culture, so it kind of fits the bill. But with the DNA testing, they actually identified there's a short period of time around the collapse where there are European markers and then they just fade out. So that implies that someone or a group of peoples from that region, like the Philistines, who do have kind of a lot of, if you've seen the artwork and stuff, kind of have a arcane Greek vibe to them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that shows that there was immigrants to the area and then mingled into the region and basically phased out because of marrying into the locals and stuff like that. So a lot of people think the Peliset are the Philistines from the Bible, and I believe southern Anatolia, northern Syria kind of area. Shekelesh, yeah, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Shekelesh, of the countries of the sea, I believe the theory is the Sicilians, Sicily Cyclades. This is one of the ones where it's kind of hard to figure out where they came from,
Okay.
but it kind of seems like a Sicily's kind of area, possibly. Um,
Mhm.
don't quote me on this one though, because I am not that confident in that.
Okay.
The Sheridan is believed from transliteration. A lot of them believe they came from Sardinia, so even west of Sicily and Italy. But there is no way to really say if they came from there or if they settled that area after things kind of quieted down after the
Okay.
collapse and all that. But basically, pottery and a lot of things kind of point to at some point the Sheridan did live on Sardinia. But that's
Okay.
not a very strong affirmative. Like, at some point they did. That's all we can really say. The Teresh was an interesting one. A lot of people seem to believe that the Teresh are the people of Troy
Okay.
from Homer's epic. And I think there was like artwork or something that but a lot of the Troy Terusia, possibly the tribe Tyrus or the Tyrrhenians.
Isn't Tyrrhenians just what the Greeks called pirates? Wasn't that like kind of their name for like pirates or Vikings?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think you are correct on that. But again, like, no one really knows.
That's kind of the whole fun of this.
Yeah, like it's just a lot of theories and educated guesswork.
Mhm.
Uh, Another group referenced the Tajeker. Uh, I think, yeah, from southern Phoenicia, Thrace, Crete, that kind of, and the Weshesh. And I believe they were believed to be either the Israelite tribe of Asher or Asua from like Western and Anatolia, but they were another like kind of archaic Greek culture.
Okay.
This is a photo I managed to pull up of what the Denian looked like from Egyptian references, and we have from the Medinet Habu built by Ramses the Third. You can kind of see this big epic battle fought by land and sea. If I can get it to kind of scroll to the right spot, thank you. But you can see in the picture, you got all these different looking groups of people. I know on your end, it's not going to be very easy to make out
That's okay.
whatsoever. But you can see that they have different headdresses, different armor, different weapons kind of spread out. And you
Mhm.
can see my kind of interpretation of the picture is that they were fought back to the shores and then battled at sea, question mark. And they were kind of defeated at sea as their boats capsized and whatnot. And then Ramses the Third kind of had his whole "I am so great" kind of moment. Put it on the Menenet Habu's walls and whatnot, and you kind of have these translations. I can't even read that, so we're not going to bother about that. But then is this the one? No, there's another picture of like Egyptian soldiers presenting Ramses with the severed hands as the body count from the battle. But I don't see that. Hatet, Arzawa, Luke. Yeah, this one's a little more clear on where kind of Alashia. Yeah, that's the name of Crete. Ugarit is kind of right here at the corner of my webcam. That's another kind of. Where was the Mycenaean? Okay, yeah, here. So you got Troy over here, and you can kind of see minor settlements versus major settlements, palaces, important fortresses, and stuff like that. And kind of. This is how widespread they were at this point.
Mm.
So it's not like, oh yeah, 600 people, and obviously these are thousands and thousands of people. Where there, I think there's anywhere guesstimate from 40 to like 80% drop in population around this time
Yeah.
period. Oh, that is not even related. Okay.
And we have like at least 10 distinct different peoples referenced that were, resorting to raiding because of lack of resources,
Yeah.
which really contributes to, whether or not, like you said, they were the victims. So, in a way they were perpetrating the the rating and everything on one or two civilizations, which was causing them issues. But the root cause of that might have been that they didn't have enough resources in the first place.
Yeah.
So
There.
so the resource scarcity of the late Bronze Age really just was a cascading force that eventually brought people to arms against each other.
Yeah. It
It's really
basically became do or die. It more or less was an apocalypse.
interesting. I've heard of like, I mean, I haven't done a lot of research on the late Bronze Age, or I never really took a class that covered it when I was in high school or college. But from what I knew about it, I knew that there was like, you talked about the collapsing of like the palace economies, where the granaries just ran empty and nobody had resources anymore, and there were uprisings. I knew about that, and I knew that obviously the power struggles between the larger powers in the region were always going to happen. We see it throughout history that they fight over territory and resources. But I never heard about the sea raiding. I never knew it was such a prevalent thing. I mean, I knew that the Phoenicians were all over in the sea, but they're not even really around until the end of the Bronze Age. So the fact that this was occurring before then by so many different people is really interesting.
Yeah, it was like I said, wasn't very well organized. It was kind of just waves of literally immigrants, I guess, people and that were displaced from either war, famine, plague, earthquakes and stuff, but like just widespread destruction across the board. You had pretty much every major power collapse at this point in this region, except for the Egyptians. They kind of the waves ended at Egypt, and there's like three major clashes that Ramses, one with Ramses the second, and two with Ramses the third, if I'm correct. Um, but essentially, the big depiction is that one last clash where they're more or less defeated. Some are taken as slaves and paraded to Ramses and stuff like that. But again, it wasn't like it was these mysterious unknown peoples to them. Some they've worked with or fought against before, and they were just kind of part of that centric Bronze Age trade route
Mhm.
in one way or another.
So we've talked a little bit about the places that the Sea Peoples were disruptive to, but um, what kind of tactics made them able to as small raiders? I mean, we saw the Vikings do it thousands of years later, so against even more advanced military fortifications. So we know that small, fast groups of raiders can be really successful. But what kind of tactics and strategy was said to be employed by these people that made them so successful and so dangerous to these really large, powerful empires?
So the strategy the superpowers kind of deployed at the time, it was all chariot based.
Yep.
Uh, so you were traditionally you would have these long lines of like phalanxes and spearmen, and then you kind of moved as a unit rather than individual soldiers. Uh, I think a big reason why they were so effective was, some of them were trained soldiers probably, but for the most part, these were people armed with swords, uh, kind of akin to the gladiators question mark. I think some of them kind of looked in that display, but very Urnfield culture, which the Urnfield culture is kind of like that Central Europe culture at the time. They literally get their name because these cultures would put their remains of the dead in urns and bury them in fields.
Mhm.
We were super creative on that one, but there a lot of C rating. I would assume there might have even been some deception or something in there because it's like some of these people might have been people they traded with before, or they could have gotten there, noticed things were fucked up, so they were like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna take what's left,
Mhm.
which caused even more people to get displaced. One of the theories is they were such a mixed bag is because they were picking people up as they were moving east. But
So not only were they raiding, but they were recruiting as they went.
yeah, so it was basically pick up stragglers, weapons, armor, all that, anything useful, and I,
Loot places that have been left behind, raid if they're not empty yet.
yeah, yeah, like there
Yeah.
was some of my stuff did reference kind of. They went more into what the tactics of like the Egyptians and all the superpowers were at the time.
It's
Not
better documented, probably.
Yeah, there really is no documentation about how the Sea Peoples fought, but with boats and stuff like that, I would assume a lot of it would be
Other
with.
than primarily at sea and very quickly coming ashore when you need to get the shit that you fought for and then leaving
Right.
before people can retaliate. Yeah, so very similar to the Viking kind of strategy.
More or less, yeah. I would assume that is kind of how it worked. And again, no one really knows.
No one knows. That was kind of the whole point. They were so fast that people didn't even have time to write about them, and so they've been forgotten to the fading memory of ancient history.
Yeah. Yeah, they were very fast for that time. The
Yep.
These fights and kind of the waves, the collapse itself is like, I think, a 300-year period.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, so I mean, it was a slow burn, but they didn't really have X to tweet about this.
Yeah.
So it happened very quickly to them from their
Yeah.
point of view, more or less.
Yeah. And writing wasn't as developed as it was in the time of Vikings either. Like that's how the Viking raids are so well documented, is because anybody that survived it would go and tell people, and then someone in, a temple somewhere, or in a church in an abbey, would write it down, or someone in the nearby castle would document it. And so that's why we know so much about Viking raids. But with writing not being as quick because you didn't have paper and ink, and with it not being as widespread, literacy not being as widespread as it was in
Yeah, this is
1200s, 8 to 1200s England.
this is a period of time where writing, the only necessity you got from writing, I guess, was long range communication
Yeah.
between the people who actually knew how to understand each other. And a lot of it was just paperwork,
Yeah.
keeping, like, having some sort of cuneiform record of showing, okay, we have this many cows, we have this much grain, uh, we have this many acres and fields and stuff like that. It wasn't something that you used in your day to day life. It was basically just used out of necessity in an administrative standpoint. Uh,
Or to document and venerate your leaders and your empire. Like
right,
we saw with Egypt, the only examples that they have of the sea peoples are, oh, look, we kicked their asses here, and here they are, and we're beating them, and here they are, and they're in chains, and we've enslaved them. Like, they're not going to tell you about how, oh, yeah, well, this is what the sea people did, and it was really effective, and they killed a lot of us and took all our shit.
right. And that's another
You're not going
thing.
to carve that on Ramses' tomb.
They displayed themselves as literal gods, so you can't really
Yes.
take everything they say literally. And
Yeah. They're going to leave out all the bad parts.
the
I
the
mean,
first
as
thing
so many people do.
the first thing I thought of when I saw that they were using hands as counts, I was like, so did they take both and count them individually? Were they pairs? Like,
What happens if one of them only has one hand when we capture him?
right, like, I need some context on how this counting worked to really know
Yeah.
how many actual, because there were numbers, and I didn't take a lot of stock in the actual numbers displayed, so I cannot remember, but it was in the thousands.
Mhm.
In an age where honestly a lot of the fighting would have been showboating. Two armies show up in a field, they stare at each other and kind of do that tug of war with the phalanx. Well, actually, this I think this might even be before that. Yeah, because they were kind of relying on chariots and whatnot. Uh,
Like, there was fighting, but it wasn't, people talk about, like, in the movie 300, for instance, or the stories about Thermopylae, they famously, the Persians had an army of a million or more men. It probably wasn't a million people.
that
No one had armies like that. The Persians for sure had a bigger army than everybody else, but it wasn't a million people. Like, the Spartans had 300 people. That's what they set to Thermopylae. 300. And it was probably a little more than 300. It was probably more like 5 or 600, and there were also like 3,000 Athenians there, but still, like, that's an army of 4,000 people defending Greece.
Yeah, 4,000 is a realistic number if you
Yeah.
pool your resources together. A
Yeah.
million people, that there's
That's your empire.
logistically that is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, how do
The
you?
logistics alone kind of contradict that.
Yeah, there's no way at this time period to take care of that many people in one spot as a fighting force.
Yeah.
If it,
I mean, Alexander was made famous because he logistically figured out how to get tens of thousands of men
yeah,
into, into Eastern
everywhere.
and or into Western and Central Asia. He almost got them all the way to India. He tried to go into India.
Yeah, and then he
Tens of thousands of Greeks in India. Yeah, and they
definitely.
died
Then he died of poison question mark or wounds question mark.
or assassination question mark or question
Right.
question question.
But yeah,
But I yeah, like millions of people, no. But so who knows what the numbers were? But if the numbers were in the thousands that they were saying they captured of the sea people, that means that the sea people were fielding pretty substantial armies for the time, or pretty substantial raiding parties, or whatever you want to call it. There were a substantial number of them. If the Egyptians were killing thousands of them,
yeah, and again,
that's not small. That's a problem.
yeah, that's not a small number, and like I said before, not all of the sea peoples were combatants.
Yeah,
So
they were just trying to survive.
yeah, with our context, it's kind of fucked up, Ramses.
Yeah, well, in fairness to Ramses, we saw the Egyptian kingdom barely survive the Bronze Age collapse, extremely weakened. The Egyptian empire went into the new Egyptian kingdom at the end of the Bronze Age and was not the same. Egypt never recovered from that.
Yeah,
So, in fairness to him, he was trying to stay alive too.
which actually, from the kind of the same DNA testing and stuff like that that they were getting into, they pretty good authority that Ramses the Third was assassinated.
Mhm.
They were able to identify wounds on his face and his throat being slashed.
By the sea peoples?
Man, probably disgruntled employees, but
It's a Caesar kind of situation. The
yeah,
Ides of March.
really no way to know. That was the big theme from all of this was every half answer I got, I had four more questions.
Yeah, and that's just the way that, a lot of ancient history goes because the writing isn't there all the time. And the
Right.
sources that you get aren't always reliable because a lot of the time it's people venerating themselves. It's not third-party sources most of the time. And if it is a third-party source, it's a legend that has been told for 100 years and someone finally wrote it down. It's like 100-year long game of telephone.
And that's one of the big theories with a lot of the tie-ins from the Archaeans and like the Iliad and stuff is
Mhm.
tale the tale eventually being told of a distant memory of the collapse and stuff. Where a lot of people are like, but like it's not that far fetched, especially when you kind of see the slivers of truth you find in a lot of these stories, such as the Philistines mentioned in the Bible. Like they were a real people,
Mhm.
regardless of you know what you believe in and stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah, they were there.
Yeah, they were a
Mhm.
people.
Yeah. Whatever you called them, whether they were actually called Philistines or something else, like someone called them Philistines and they were there doing shit all throughout the Bronze Age.
And that's another really hard thing to dig through is everybody kind of had their own names for other people and
Yeah.
themselves, so
Yeah.
it's a lot of cross comparison, and it was like, okay, so these people mentioned by the Egyptians have a lot in common with these people mentioned by these guys. Are they the same people? Well, maybe.
Yeah, it's not like all the sea peoples were showing up at the UN and signing the ledger. Like there
Right,
was no UN.
like the Shekelesh, Shurden, these are all like the Egyptian names for these people.
Sometimes the empires couldn't even agree what to call each other unless they were like the biggest three at the time. Sometimes a pretty big empire gets called something different by two different kingdoms because they just never interacted with them in the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the lack of the lack of a standard in ancient historical texts kind of skews some of what we might be able to read. But it
Yeah,
is very interesting.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun digging into this because, like, my biggest interest is kind of like the ancient Rome to medieval area, but I
Mm.
still get a little kick out of, especially the vindication of actually being able to use the information from the Iliad and stuff that at the time I absolutely did not want to read in school.
Yeah.
Actually getting some use from it. I'm looking
Yeah.
at you, calculus.
Yeah. So we talked about Troy potentially being one of these sea peoples. Is it possible that the Battle of Troy was like part of this whole Bronze Age collapse, and the Greeks were like, "Listen, Troy is a fucking problem. They are like one of the biggest sea peoples, and they're an issue, and we're gonna go take them out."
Yeah, so from the epic, the whole
From the epic, it's
shindig,
all about like
the
honor
riot,
and like Helen.
yeah,
Yeah,
Helen
it's all
being
about Helen being
stolen.
stolen. Yeah,
Uh,
she ran away with Paris, and Agamemnon was like, "I'm gonna go to Troy and take down the whole city."
but that is something that kind of crossed my mind immediately because I was like, okay, so if I were to take context and assume that the base actions are true, Helen went from point A to point B, that could be her fleeing the destruction and stuff like that. And then, that fight in some form or another did happen at Troy. Troy did fall. Was it the Greeks taking credit for someone else's actions? Was it the Greeks themselves after they were picked up by the sea peoples? It's a possibility.
Mhm. Well, and another thing is like, Helen could be like a metaphor. Like you talked about, they knew like the sea peoples were known to all of the major empires at the time. They did dealings with them, they did trade, and then eventually it came to a point where when resources became scarce, it turned into fighting. So maybe, Troy was like a long time, not necessarily ally, but maybe a trade partner with Greece, and then they came raiding when there were no more, like maybe Greece didn't want to buy their things, or maybe Troy ran out of resources because it's in more of a desert location. And so they came raiding, and then Greece responded. And Helen was just the metaphor for resources.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, that's. I didn't consider the metaphor.
Not that Helen is an impossibility. I mean, like, could a Greek king have gone to total war with another civilization over his queen being stolen? Yeah, it could have happened.
Oh,
But
for
it makes a
sure.
lot more sense when it's about survival, I think.
Yeah, it seems much less hot-headed and I guess egotistical almost.
As much as we wanna paint Agamemnon in a bad light, maybe he was like, "Shit, dude, we can't let this keep happening. Let's go over there and kick their ass."
Yeah, it's
And then Troy was wiped off the face of the map. So
shit. I think that happened to Troy a lot, actually. The
poor Troy.
so they think they know where Troy is now. I'll pull back. It's called like Wellusha or something from like the Hittite point of view, I think. Uh, but this is probably old news at this point. But they think they found Troy's locate. Ah, that's the wrong
I
screen.
remember that being a pretty big thing when we were in, like, maybe high school or something. Like, it's one of my earlier, like, getting news on the internet memories.
Yeah, so like if you really need to brush up, Troy, Anatolia, like right here.
Yeah.
And Troy itself has like, I don't know, man, off the top of my head, I want to throw the number like 8 to 11 different layers to it, and where there are
Like
different
concentric walls or
layers in the sense of over time, okay, Troy existed in this time period,
Oh,
was
okay.
destroyed,
Okay.
resettled, you have a new layer in city that gets destroyed, and there's a lot of references to like the sixth layer of Troy and stuff. So they might have had a really rough time, man. I don't know what was going on there, but they really, really like to tear shit up.
Yeah, I mean the place where Troy was located, it's um it's in Turkey, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's like right along the Dardanelles, like heading into the split between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. So it's like a really strategically important place for maritime trade,
Yep.
in
Uh,
theory.
actually, that is a very, very likely spot just from that. That is actually a huge factor in Ugarit's location, except in this case, instead of it being like a waterway, it was the shortest land distance between the Mediterranean and shit, what's that sea on the other side?
The Black Sea?
I think
Yeah, up above Constantinople. Yeah, it's the Black Sea.
not up by Constantinople, but to the
Istanbul, I'm sorry.
east of Ugarit, which is like
I need to see where that
kind of
is.
Syria.
Well,
In the
that's yeah,
Levant.
that's the Mediterranean. Yeah, that's the Mediterranean. Oh,
Yeah.
the Red Sea. The Red Sea, probably.
The Red Sea
If it
would be
went
down south.
yeah, if it went down, I don't know how big Ugarit
Uh,
and its was it just a city state?
yeah, Ugarit was a city state. It wasn't a
Okay, then yeah,
nation.
it's just in the Eastern Mediterranean
Yeah. But it was on the Mediterranean,
then.
but its location kind of made it a really good trade point from shit coming from the east
Yeah.
and other lands. I don't really know what China and all those nations. India definitely was going on at this point as well. Um, and then that's another thing is a lot of different places had their Bronze Age, roughly same time frame, but some people had longer, shorter, started earlier, ended earlier type of thing. It's not this one centric where, okay, this is the Bronze Age, this is the Neolithic, this is the copper, this is the iron, but it's just, you know, and actually iron work did exist at this time, but it was not widespread at all. I think the earliest known was iron working is like 1300 BC.
Yeah. Yeah, like right around the time of the Bronze Age collapse. Because isn't like early iron metallurgy part of the whole Bronze Age collapse issue?
So it was
Getting into
less
things that
of
you
an
didn't really
issue and
research as
more of a
much.
solution because of the
Okay.
lack of access to tin.
Mm.
uh versus iron is pretty much everywhere.
So it was rather than being maybe an issue in terms of like resource scarcity, it was disruptive to the resource balance, and so the people that were powerful because they had bronze no longer had as much power because all of a sudden everybody figured out how to use a way more readily available and also stronger resource.
Uh, it's more of a that could have been the case in some
Mhm.
instances, but it's more of a because of the trade routes being disrupted and all that, we no longer have tin, things are collapsing.
Mhm.
You can't really make the trek to Afghanistan to get your tin.
Yeah.
You're going to have to find someone who knows a solution or figure out a solution for yourself. The couple people who did know how to use iron at that point are able to share their information with people, and that spreads as a solution to suddenly not being able to get your fix.
Mhm.
But I would assume there's got to be at least one instance where iron did upset kind of the holding of power.
Yeah, like the Sea Peoples, we've talked about them having issues because they didn't have access to bronze. Maybe they were able to use like proto iron weapons and proto iron technology to like disrupt the Bronze Age marketplace and disrupt the Bronze Age power balance because all of a sudden they showed up and they're like, wait, I thought they didn't have access to all these weapons. Where did they get all this shit from? And they're just using like crude iron.
They're very well maybe part of what made the Sea People so strong is they themselves were using iron.
Yeah, maybe. And how will we ever know?
Right. Who knows?
That's like my favorite because that really does make them like Mediterranean Vikings. If they were showing up using like a semi-advanced type of weaponry, because that's one of the things that Vikings did is they really like made really good weapons. they
Yeah.
they were really good iron workers, and so they made really good weapons, and they stole what they couldn't make, and they were able to use like really fast tactics combined with things that were really specialized and they were really good with them to upset people who lived in castles and had like moats and shit. They're like, yeah, well, we don't really care because we're just gonna come over your walls really, really fast and kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, oh, you live in the castle, but you get your supplies from this town that has wooden walls 5 feet high. Uh oh. Wait, you it's on the water? Oh no. It's on a river with access for our boats? Oh no.
Say no more, fam. I'm on my way.
And that's another thing that I wonder with as far as Egypt goes, were the Sea People like sailing up the Nile and like screwing up all of the upstream agriculture for the Egyptians because a lot of their agriculture was all up the Nile for like hundreds and hundreds of miles.
So, what one of the things that actually played into account,
Mm.
where's the map that had, oh, I think it was under notes. You can see kind of three of the sites of battle. The Egyptians knew the Nile by heart. That was their lifeblood. Their entire empire is centered around this thing. They know it like the back of their hand. They knew where to hide their ships so
Yeah, it's
that,
1,000-mile long oasis in the middle of the desert. You got to protect it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they kind of use that to their advantage.
Mhm.
And, you can set up ambushes, you can take them by surprise, and all these other things. They definitely tried, don't get me wrong. But,
So
I
the
mean,
Egyptians were fighting them up and down the Nile though.
yeah, more I would have guessed
More
at the
down
mouth,
probably.
at,
Yeah.
at the
Yeah,
mouth of the
somewhere in the
Nile.
delta
There was
or near Cairo where the
definitely
delta comes together.
land battles. Like I said, at one point they sided with the Libyans over here in the west, and I think they had a land battle to the east as well as they kind of made their way down this way. Because not all the Sea People were of the seas.
Yeah. They just, used boats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, that was their
Because we're
cars.
creative. We're creative at naming people. Oh, you use boats? You're boatman now.
Yeah, basically, for everybody who actually are experts at this subject and they have spent a good portion of their lives trying to figure this shit out, they only use the Sea Peoples as a term begrudgingly because it hooked and
Because
everybody
that's what
used
everybody
it.
says.
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, they're not happy about it.
Mhm. So the aftermath, obviously, regardless of whether they caused it or were a major contributor or were just one of many factors, the aftermath is the Bronze Age collapse. And there's a lot of different societies that are collapsing, but also we see during the Bronze Age collapse the rise of the Phoenician city states, which then became the major naval power in the world
Right. And
for a very long time.
eventually, Mycenaeans bounced back.
Hmm. Yep, and we saw that's Alexander.
Right.
um,
Eventually, Rome pops into the field, and
and then Rome takes over the whole Mediterranean.
Persian Empire and stuff like that. Like, it's one of those situations where, ooh, you almost had us. Gotta be
Yeah,
quicker than that.
yeah. But the Egyptians, they never really recovered. They were never the same. The Assyrians never really recovered. They were weakened for a very long time, and then eventually the Persians came on and took over that whole area.
Yeah. Mycenaeans completely just fucking collapsed. The
Went into a
Hittites.
dark age for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
We don't have like any history for like 500 years from them. Yeah, the Hittites collapsed. They didn't survive. And the sea people, the different places that you've talked about, those like Sardinia, for example, like the people who lived on Sardinia, whether or not they were sea people to begin with, they definitely settled there at one time. We have artifacts that show that. And so it seems like maybe the sea peoples, once everything kind of chilled out, maybe just went home and they never really became a big power except the Phoenicians. But they didn't really die out either. They kind of were small tribes that people did business with, and they probably continued to be that later into the Iron Age.
Yeah, actually, the Denians in particular, it is believed that they were given permission to settle in southern Canaan by
Hmm.
the 20th dynasty of Egypt. I don't know who gave the okay. I cannot make sense of the Egyptian dynasties whatsoever. They're especially around
Is that
Ramses.
post Ramses the Third?
Uh, yes, I think Ramses
Okay.
the Third was 19th.
Okay.
But again, do not quote me. I'm not an Egyptologist.
Me either.
Um, but yeah, Denian, like I said, shoot, where did my notes go? I had notes on paper for them.
You said they were allowed by the 20th dynasty to settle in Canaan, which is, of course, another land of big biblical fame, much like the Philistines.
Yeah.
Canaan is famous. Canaan, Babylon, the Philistines, all great biblical landmarks that we can go by.
Yeah.
And Canaan turned into, I mean, Canaan was more than just the coastline, but Canaan like eventually gave way to the Phoenicians, didn't it?
Same region, yeah. That
Yeah.
whole area, kind of like the coast of on the eastern Mediterranean, that's a region at this point kind of referred to as the Levant.
Yeah.
And then you got Anatolia to the north, and then Archaean Greece and all that, the Mycenaeans. Uh, but yeah, more or less.
It was the kind of the area where everything, like all of the big empires in the late Bronze Age, all of their interests kind of overlapped. It was like the middle of the world,
Yeah,
is what Canaan was at the time.
that was pretty much the meeting point from the Mediterranean to like your Eastern powers, who you might have point A and point B don't never met, but they might know of each other
Mhm.
from
And
like
that was the land where they met.
yeah, indirectly through people, traders and whatnot.
Yeah. The vast middle of the world.
That's another big one, is whether or not the Romans and the Chinese ever interacted, but that's an entirely separate.
That's a different episode. We
Yeah.
might go there. That's a different episode. We're not talking about that today. So, the legacy of the sea people then, what would you call it? Sum up the legacy of the sea people.
The legacy of the sea people
Mhm.
is more or less the struggle of humanity.
Expand on that. What do you mean?
The legacy of humanity is convoluted. It is very brief in the whole concept of things, but to the individual, very long. But there's always a will and always a way. Like, these people got uprooted from their lives, moved across what was at the point the known world. Not literally from, Timbuktu or whatever, but what they knew, that literally across the world in the name of
Mhm.
survival. And they went through volcanic eruptions, they went through plague, they went through fires, earthquakes, invasion,
Famine.
famine. And at the end of the day, uh, failed invasion at Egypt aside, someone might be an or a descendant of the sea peoples.
Oh, almost assuredly is.
When you have like a 40 to 80% drop in population, there's not a lot of people left at that point in this point of history. Like,
I
I,
thought it was interesting how you said their legacy, like humanity, is long to the individual, but so brief in the scale of things. Because what we've talked about here, almost no one who isn't like a late Bronze Age junkie is going to ever have heard of them.
right,
No one will ever have heard of them. And they were like, maybe not a major world power, but they were a major disruptive force for hundreds of years right before the collapse of everything. And they're documented all over the place. There were tons of different peoples attributed to being these people. And like so many other things, they're just a note on the back of a page somewhere for a lot of people. They've never even read it, never paid any attention to it. The legacy is it is what it is.
right.
It's so interesting. I like that. Long to the individual and short, fleeting, if you will,
Yeah, brief.
scale of things. Okay. Well, thanks for that. That was cool. That was fun.
For sure.
Any any more thoughts that you wanna cover before we wrap it up here?
That went a heck of a lot better than I thought it was going to.
Yeah, that was really cool, man.
As someone who was cramming notes at work today.
Well, I have no clue what I'm gonna do for episode 2 because Mike and I kind of agreed that we're gonna take this in turns, and one person will be the interviewer, the learner, whatever you want, and the other will be the lecturer, the pontificator,
Yeah.
the font of knowledge. So we're gonna take turns reversing those roles. So next time it'll be something that I've decided to deep dive on, and I don't know if I want this to turn into like a history podcast. So I don't know if I
No.
want to do just history. Um, maybe I'll do like card games or something.
Yeah, literally anything that interests you.
Yeah. But it could very well be another history episode. So if you like history, if you don't like history, let us know either way. Maybe give us some suggestions. If one of us thinks it's an interesting suggestion, maybe we'll do an episode on it. Um, yeah, stay tuned for more episodes. Where do we plan to post these? Are we going to be posting them on YouTube and podcast sources?
Shoot. What do they say? And on
Wherever
uh
podcasts are available,
yeah, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast is probably
wherever
just going to
you
be
get your
those two.
podcasts.
Uh, eh,
Yeah,
and I'll probably
maybe Apple Podcasts. We'll check out publishing through iHeart, Epic Podcast or Epic, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, but we'll definitely put them on YouTube because that's easy.
if you're seeing this, you found us.
Hey, hit the subscribe button, like and subscribe for the algorithm. Do it. It's right
Plug
down there. It's really easy.
time. Hit that button down below. Hit the
And
bell.
we don't have any sponsors yet, but if you're a sponsor, if you're interested, I mean, this could be your
Fuck
time to
me.
shine. We could do an ad break in the middle, then Mike doesn't have to talk for 45 minutes to an hour. It was an hour and a half. Oh my god.
Yeah,
Then Mike doesn't have to talk for an hour and a half straight. We could do an ad break and then I'll read the ads.
Manscaped 8.0.
As you could see, we could use some Manscaped.
Yeah. Oh my.
And as you can't see.
Actually, I not sponsored. I bought new razors from the Dollar Shave Club because I am actually on my last one right now.
Do you like Dollar Shave Club?
Uh, yeah, kind of like
I've never used them, so I don't know. No horse in this race.
they're kind of split up to like yeah, roughly $10 will get you 4 blades, or if you they have like a I cannot afford $10 pack where it's like a 2 blade razor rather than the traditional now 4 blade, and those are
Mhm.
like $4. So if you're really in a pinch,
Yeah. I mean, that's
compared,
basically the same price as buying a Gillette from the store.
yeah,
And you get it delivered to your house. You don't have to go anywhere.
yeah, that
Not a
actually,
sponsor, but Dollar Shave Club, that's kind of dope.
I was actually looking at like Gillette earlier, and it's like 26 to like $36 for razors on
Yeah, well, I mean,
Amazon.
that's if you buy like the big one and then it's like a 5 pack of like the refills or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, that's still like $4 a piece. And if you get them delivered to your house, Dollar Shave Club,
hit
hit
me
us
up.
up.
Yeah,
We already like you. We already like you, and this guy would love a deal on some razors.
that's
Get
the
him a
thing
code.
is, I won't accept sponsors from something I don't believe in. So,
Yeah, me.
Hot Pocket,
All right.
I believe in you.
We believe in hot pockets. Okay, fun little story before we wrap this up. When when Mike and I were growing up, so for those who don't know, Mike and I are like lifelong friends. We met on like the second day of kindergarten, and we have been friends ever since.
Pretty much.
There were
Yeah.
times in our relationship where we got separated and didn't see each other for like years, and then we came back together. Like we didn't see each other from like first grade to fourth grade because I moved to a different school. I moved to a different town and a different school, like 30 miles away, and then I came back and we reunited and then we've been friends ever since.
Hmm.
But back in the day, I used to go to Mike's house quite a lot, and I mean, not that it was the only thing that we'd eat, because this man he makes eggs professionally now, and rightly so because he used to make some banging breakfast when I'd stay at his house. But if we were hungry and nobody was home and we didn't want to make anything, they had a fridge in their or the freezer in their basement that was, I kid you not, stocked to the teeth. It was a full sized freezer, like 6 feet tall, 3 feet wide, full size freezer, and you open it up and there's nothing but hot pockets in it, just boxes and boxes and boxes of hot pockets. We ate so many damn hot pockets. The ham and cheese ones are the best, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I know a lot of people like the pepperoni. I like the ham and cheese.
Thin sliced ham and cheese, not that
Yes.
cubed ass shit.
No, no, no. It's got to be the slices. Yeah, for sure, for sure. We used to eat a lot of hot pockets. We believe in that brand.
Yeah, after all that, it took me years to actually eat Hot Pockets again because I was so damn sick of them.
Yeah. Good memories. Okay, so anyways, on that note, thank you for tuning into the early morning sad hour, which took place from 6:30 to 8 p.m. local time.
Yeah.
We'll be back with episode 2 very soon, hopefully. Yeah, like and subscribe. See us wherever podcasts are available. Yay, we'll figure it out. We'll get better at that.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Bye.
Disconnect.